I discovered the theft on a bitter January morning in 2025 when I walked outside my cabin in Ashland, Oregon with my coffee mug and noticed something odd about my woodpile. The stack looked shorter than it should have been, and there were fresh boot prints in the snow leading right up to it. My name is Paul Garrison, and I had been living in the Pine Ridge community for 3 years at that point. I bought my cabin specifically because I wanted to get away from city life in Portland and enjoy some peace in the mountains. The place came with 2 acres of property, most of it covered in Douglas fir and ponderosa pine. I had spent the better part of the previous autumn splitting and stacking cord after cord of seasoned firewood, enough to get me through the harsh winter months when temperatures regularly dropped below freezing. I set my coffee down on the porch railing and walked over to examine the woodpile more carefully. Someone had definitely taken wood from my stack, not just a few logs either. I estimated at least half a cord was missing, maybe more. The thief had been clever about it, taking from the back and sides so it was not immediately obvious. But I knew my woodpile. I had built it myself, log by log, and I could tell when something was off. The boot prints led away from my property toward the community center building that housed the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association office. That was interesting. I followed them through the snow, my breath coming out in white clouds in the freezing air. The trail went straight to the back of the community center where there was a large stone fireplace visible through the windows. Inside, I could see smoke rising from a cheerful fire. I tried the back door. Locked. So I walked around to the front entrance and pushed through the heavy wooden door. The warmth hit me immediately, along with the smell of burning wood. My wood, I was starting to suspect. A woman in her mid-50s looked up from behind a desk. She had short blonde hair styled in that particular way that screamed entitlement, and she wore a purple cardigan over a white blouse. Her name tag read Brenda Hutchins, HOA president. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she would rather do anything but help me. "I'm Paul Garrison from 247 Timber Lane," I said. "I was wondering if you could tell me where the HOA got the firewood for that fire." I pointed to the stone fireplace where logs were crackling away merrily. Brenda's expression did not change. "The HOA maintains a woodpile for community use. We use it to heat this building during board meetings and community events." "Interesting," I said. "Where exactly is this community woodpile?" "That is HOA business," she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "Is there something specific I can help you with, Mr. Garrison?" "Someone took wood from my property last night, about half a cord. The boot prints led here." Brenda stood up from her desk, and I noticed she was wearing boots. Hiking boots with a distinctive tread pattern that looked remarkably similar to the prints I had just followed through the snow. "I am sure you are mistaken," she said. "Perhaps you miscalculated how much wood you had." "I did not miscalculate. I stacked every piece myself. Someone stole from my woodpile, and I want to know who." "Are you accusing the HOA of theft, Mr. Garrison?" Her voice went up an octave and her face started to turn red, "because that is a very serious accusation. I could have you fined for harassment." "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am just stating facts. Wood is missing from my property and there are boot prints leading here. I would like an explanation." "The explanation is that you are wrong," Brenda said. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. Close the door on your way out." I stood there for a moment, debating whether to push harder, but I could see this was going nowhere. Brenda had her arms crossed and was staring at me with the kind of hostile expression that told me any further conversation would be pointless. "Have a good day," I said finally and walked out. But I was not done. Not by a long shot. That evening, I called my neighbor Tom Chen, who lived 2 properties down from me. Tom was a retired contractor in his 60s who had lived in Pine Ridge for over a decade. If anyone would know about HOA shenanigans, it would be him. "Paul, good to hear from you," Tom said when he picked up. "What's going on?" I explained the situation with the woodpile and my conversation with Brenda. Tom was quiet for a moment, then he sighed. "I was wondering when they would start on your pile." "What do you mean?" "They have been doing this for years, Paul. Taking wood from people's private stacks to heat the community center. They did it to me for 2 winters before I caught on and started locking my woodshed." "Are you serious? That is theft." "Of course it is theft, but Brenda and her crew on the board do not see it that way. They think because we pay HOA fees, they are entitled to whatever resources they need for community purposes. I tried to fight it a few years back, but they threatened me with so many fines and violations that I eventually just gave up and secured my wood." "How much did they take from you?" "Over the course of 2 winters, probably 3 or 4 cords, maybe more. At the time, firewood was running about $300 a cord for season hardwood, so they stole well over $1,000 worth of my property." I felt my jaw clench, and they just got away with it. "Most people do not notice," Tom said. "Or if they do, they figure it is not worth the fight. Brenda can make your life miserable if you cross her. She will find every tiny violation in the HOA bylaws and hit you with fines. Last year she fined the Hendersons $500 because their mailbox was the wrong shade of brown. The wrong shade, Paul. She had a color card and everything. That is insane. That is Brenda Hutchins. My advice: lock up your woodpile and move on. Trust me, it is not worth the headache." I thanked Tom for the information and hung up. Then I sat in my living room, staring at the fire in my own fireplace, thinking. Tom's advice made sense from a practical standpoint. The easiest thing would be to secure my woodpile and forget about it. But something about that did not sit right with me. I had spent weeks cutting, splitting, and stacking that wood. It represented hours of hard physical labor, not to mention the cost of the wood itself. And more than that, it was the principle of the thing. Brenda and her HOA board thought they could just take whatever they wanted from people's private property because no one would stand up to them. Well, they had not met me yet. Over the next few days, I started keeping a close eye on my woodpile. I set up a trail camera, the kind hunters used to monitor game, positioned to capture anyone who approached the stack. I also started measuring and documenting exactly how much wood I had, taking photos from multiple angles with timestamps. It did not take long to catch them. 3 days later, the trail camera captured clear footage of 2 people approaching my woodpile at 6:30 in the morning. One of them was Brenda Hutchins. The other was a man I did not recognize, probably in his early 40s, wearing a gray beanie and a puffy jacket. The video showed them loading wood into a pickup truck, making multiple trips until they had taken what I estimated to be another quarter cord. They were not even trying to hide it. They just walked onto my property like they owned the place and helped themselves. I saved the video footage to 3 different locations, including cloud storage. Then, I started researching. I discovered that firewood prices in the Ashland area had actually gone up significantly in the past year due to supply chain issues and increased demand. Seasoned firewood was now running between $400 and $500 per cord, depending on the type of wood and who you bought it from. I called several local suppliers to get quotes and documented everything. I also looked up Oregon's laws on theft. Under Oregon Revised Statute 164.015, theft is defined as taking or withholding property of another with intent to deprive the other of the property. The value of the property determines whether it is considered first-degree theft, second-degree theft, or third-degree theft. Based on what they had taken from me so far, we were easily in second-degree theft territory, which is a misdemeanor. But I was not ready to go to the police yet. I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted documentation, evidence, a pattern of behavior that could not be denied or explained away. So I let them keep stealing over the next 2 months. My trail camera captured the HOA taking wood from my pile on 7 separate occasions. Sometimes it was Brenda and the man in the gray beanie. Sometimes it was Brenda and a different woman. Once, it was 3 people I did not recognize at all, though I later learned they were all members of the HOA board. Each time, I documented everything. I took measurements of the woodpile before and after. I calculated volumes. I researched current market prices for firewood. I even drove by the community center on multiple occasions to verify that my wood was indeed being burned in their fireplace. I could tell because I had been burning primarily oak and madrone, which have distinctive characteristics when they burn, and I could see the same types of wood in their fireplace through the windows. By March, I estimated that the HOA had stolen approximately 2.5 cords of firewood from my property. At current market rates of $450 per cord, that was $1,125 worth of wood. But I was not going to bill them at current market rate. I was going to bill them at replacement cost, which included delivery fees and the premium price for seasoned wood in high demand. I also started researching Oregon's laws on interest. According to Oregon law, the legal rate of interest for judgments is 9% per annum. Additionally, I could potentially claim damages for the time and effort I had spent dealing with this situation. In early April, I finally made my move. I compiled all of my documentation into a detailed spreadsheet. Every theft was listed with the date, time, estimated volume of wood taken, current market rate, and calculated cost. I included screenshots from the trail camera footage. I had statements from 3 different firewood suppliers confirming current prices. I had photos of my woodpile showing the diminishing stack. I even had photos of the wood burning in the HOA's fireplace. The total came to $2,180. That included the cost of the wood at replacement value, delivery fees for 2.5 cords, and a premium for seasoned hardwood. I then calculated 9% annual interest from the date of the first theft in January, which added another $87 to the total. I printed out a formal invoice on professional letterhead that I had made specifically for this purpose. The invoice was addressed to the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Attention, Brenda Hutchins. It itemized every single theft with dates, volumes, and costs. At the bottom, it stated, "Payment due within 30 days. Failure to remit payment will result in legal action including but not limited to small claims court filing, police report for theft, and formal complaint to the Oregon State District Attorney's Office." I hand-delivered the invoice to the HOA office on a Thursday morning. Brenda was not there, but a younger woman who worked as the administrative assistant accepted the envelope. I also sent copies via certified mail to Brenda's home address and to each of the 5 board members. I wanted to make absolutely sure there could be no claim that they did not receive it. Then I waited. I did not have to wait long. The next afternoon, my phone rang. I did not recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Garrison, this is Brenda Hutchins." Her voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "I just received your ridiculous invoice, and I have to say, this is the most absurd thing I have ever seen. You cannot seriously expect the HOA to pay you over $2,000 for firewood. The invoice is completely serious," I said calmly. The HOA has been stealing firewood from my property for months. I have documented evidence of every theft. You have 30 days to pay, or I will pursue legal remedies. We did not steal anything, Brenda practically shouted into the phone. The HOA bylaws clearly state that common resources can be used for community purposes. Firewood falls under common resources. My privately owned woodpile on my private property is not a common resource, I said. It is my personal property, and taking it without permission is theft. I have video footage of you personally removing wood from my property on multiple occasions. Would you like me to send you copies? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You have been filming us, Brenda finally said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I have been filming my own property, which I have every legal right to do. The fact that you appear in those videos is because you were trespassing and stealing. This is harassment, Mr. Garrison. I am calling an emergency board meeting, and we will be discussing serious sanctions against you. You will regret this. The only thing I regret is not locking up my woodpile sooner, I said. But I am glad I let it go on as long as I did, because now I have more than enough evidence to pursue criminal charges if necessary. You have 30 days, Brenda. I suggest you discuss it with the board. She hung up without another word. That evening I got a call from Tom Chen. Paul, what the hell did you do? He asked, though he sounded more amused than angry. Brenda has been calling everyone in the neighborhood ranting about you. She is saying you are trying to extort the HOA. I sent them an invoice for the wood they stole from me. That is not extortion, that is demanding payment for stolen property. Tom laughed. Oh man, you really went for it. How much? Over $2,000, including interest. Tom whistled. That is more than I expected. Do you really have evidence? Video footage of every theft, detailed documentation, the whole 9 yards. I spent 2 months building the case. You know she is going to fight this, right? Brenda does not back down from anything. I am counting on it, I said. The more she fights, the more it is going to cost her in the end. The next few weeks were interesting. First, I received a formal letter from the HOA threatening me with $5,000 in fines for various supposed violations. These included mailbox not being regulation height, exterior paint color not approved, firewood pile being an eyesore, and my personal favorite, creating a hostile environment for the HOA board. I responded with a letter from an attorney I had consulted. The attorney pointed out that the mailbox height violation was false, as my mailbox was exactly the height specified in the bylaws, which I had measured and photographed. The exterior paint color had been approved in writing when I bought the house. The firewood pile was on my private property and not visible from the street, so it could not possibly be an eyesore under any reasonable interpretation of the bylaws. And as for creating a hostile environment, demanding payment for stolen property was not harassment. It was exercising my legal rights. The letter also noted that if the HOA proceeded with retaliatory fines, I would add those to my lawsuit and seek additional damages for harassment and abuse of power. The fines were quietly dropped. Then Brenda tried a different approach. She called another board meeting and proposed a new rule that all firewood on private property was considered a community resource that could be used for common purposes. Apparently, she thought she could retroactively legitimize the theft, but Brenda had made a critical error. She had pissed off enough people over the years that when word of this proposed rule got out, there was immediate backlash. Tom Chen started a phone tree, calling everyone he knew in the neighborhood. Within 2 days, over 50 homeowners had signed a petition demanding that the proposed rule be rejected and that Brenda be removed from the board. The proposed rule died before it even came to a vote. As the 30-day deadline approached, I received a call from a man who identified himself as Richard Maloney, the HOA's attorney. "Mr. Garrison, I am calling to discuss the invoice you sent to the HOA regarding firewood. My client disputes your claims and believes this is a misunderstanding that can be resolved without legal action." "There is no misunderstanding," I said. "The HOA stole my property. I have video evidence. I want to be paid for what was taken. Mr. Garrison, perhaps we can reach a compromise. The HOA is willing to offer you $500 as a gesture of goodwill to resolve this matter." $500. I am owed over $2,000. My client believes your valuation is inflated and not reflective of actual market value. Your client is wrong. I have statements from 3 suppliers confirming prices. I have detailed calculations showing volume. And I have video evidence of the theft. If you want to dispute my numbers, we can do it in court, where I will also be adding the cost of my time, legal fees, and additional damages. Richard Maloney was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Garrison, I want to be clear about something. If you pursue this, the HOA will fight you every step of the way. They have resources and they are prepared to make this as difficult and expensive as possible for you." "Is that a threat?" "It is a reality check. You are looking at a lengthy legal battle over $2,000. Is that really worth your time?" "Absolutely," I said. "Because this is not just about the money. It is about stopping the HOA from thinking they can steal from people with impunity. If I back down now, they will just keep doing it to someone else." "I see. Well, I had to try. I will inform my client that you are unwilling to negotiate." "Oh, I am willing to negotiate," I said, "but the starting point is full payment of the invoice. If they want to negotiate down from there, we can discuss it, but I am not accepting $500 for $2,000 worth of stolen property." Another pause. "I will relay that to my client." The 30-day deadline came and went with no payment. So on day 31, I did exactly what I had promised. I filed a police report for theft, filed a small claims court action for the full amount plus interest and court costs, and sent a formal complaint to the Oregon Department of Justice's Consumer Protection Division detailing the HOA's pattern of theft and abuse. The police report was particularly interesting. I met with Officer Sarah Martinez at the Ashland Police Department and showed her all of my evidence. She watched the trail camera footage with an increasingly skeptical expression. "Let me get this straight," she said. "The HOA president has been stealing firewood from your property for months, and you have video of every theft." "That is correct." "And you waited until now to report it." "I wanted to document a pattern of behavior," I said. "If I had reported it after the first theft, they might have claimed it was a mistake or misunderstanding. But 2 months of repeated thefts, that shows intent." Officer Martinez nodded slowly. "You are right about that, and you say other homeowners have experienced the same thing." "At least one that I know of, probably more. The HOA has been doing this for years apparently." She made some notes in her report. "Okay, I am going to write this up and send it to our detective division. Based on the value of the property and the video evidence, this would be second-degree theft at minimum. The detective will probably want to interview you and possibly other victims. Are you willing to press charges?" "Absolutely. Even though it might take a while and could get messy." "I am in it for the long haul," I said. Officer Martinez gave me a thin smile. "I have to say, most people would not go to this much trouble over firewood, but I respect it. The HOA has been a thorn in our side for a while now. We have had complaints about them before, but nothing we could really act on. This is different." 2 days later, I got a call from Detective James Kowalski. He wanted to meet at my house to see the woodpile and the trail camera setup. When he arrived, he was a stocky man in his early 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. I showed him everything. The woodpile, the trail camera, the footage on my laptop. I walked him through my documentation and calculations. "This is thorough," Detective Kowalski said, scrolling through the spreadsheet I'd created. "You ever work in law enforcement?" "No, I am a software engineer. I am just methodical," he nodded. "Well, your methodical approach just made my job a hell of a lot easier. I have enough here to charge Miss Hutchins with second-degree theft at minimum, possibly conspiracy if we can show that other board members were involved in planning this. What happens next? I will interview the other people who appear in your videos. I will also reach out to other homeowners to see if anyone else wants to file a report. Then I will present the case to the district attorney's office. Based on what I am seeing here, I would be shocked if they did not prosecute. How long does that take?" "Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. The wheels of justice turn slowly. But in the meantime, make sure you lock up that woodpile and keep your trail camera running. If they are dumb enough to try again now that you have filed a report, that is just more evidence." I took his advice. I bought a heavy chain and lock and secured my remaining firewood. I also added a second trail camera for redundancy. The small claims court date was set for early June. In Oregon, small claims court can handle cases up to $10,000, so my claim was well within their jurisdiction. I prepared for the hearing like I was preparing for a major product launch at work. I created a presentation with photos, videos, documentation, and calculations. I printed multiple copies of everything. I even created a timeline showing each theft with corresponding video stills. When the court date arrived, I showed up 30 minutes early dressed in a suit. Brenda arrived 5 minutes before the hearing was supposed to start, accompanied by Richard Maloney, the HOA's attorney. She looked confident, almost smug. That confidence would not last long. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Moore. She had a reputation for being fair but stern, and she did not tolerate nonsense in her courtroom. "This is case number 2025 SC 1847, Paul Garrison versus Pine Ridge Homeowners Association," Judge Moore said. "Mr. Garrison, you are the plaintiff. Please present your case." I stood up and approached the podium. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward theft case. The defendant, through its president Brenda Hutchins and other board members, systematically stole firewood from my private property over a period of approximately 2 months. I am seeking compensation for the value of the stolen wood plus interest and court costs." I then proceeded to walk through my evidence, showing the trail camera footage on a laptop connected to a screen the court provided. I showed the judge my calculations, my pricing documentation from suppliers, and photos of the woodpile at various stages of depletion. The trail camera footage was particularly damning. You could clearly see Brenda and others loading wood into a truck, making multiple trips and driving away. The timestamps and dates were all there. Judge Moore watched everything in silence, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she turned to Brenda and Richard Maloney. "Does the defendant wish to respond?" Richard Maloney stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA disputes Mr. Garrison's characterization of events. The HOA bylaws state that common resources may be used for community purposes. The firewood in question was located on property within the HOA's jurisdiction and therefore fell under this provision. Does the HOA have any documentation showing that Mr. Garrison's private woodpile was designated as a common resource?" Judge Moore asked. The bylaws are broadly written to give the HOA discretion in managing community resources, Richard said, which was not actually an answer. I will take that as a no, Judge Moore said dryly. Miss Hutchins, you dispute that you personally removed firewood from Mr. Garrison's property. Brenda stood up, her face red. Your Honor, I was acting in my capacity as HOA president to maintain the community center. We needed firewood to heat the building during meetings, and it seemed reasonable to use readily available resources rather than purchasing expensive commercial firewood. Readily available resources that belong to someone else, Judge Moore asked. The community operates as a collective, Brenda said. What benefits the community benefits everyone, including Mr. Garrison. That is an interesting philosophy, Judge Moore said. Did you ask Mr. Garrison for permission to take his firewood? I did not think it was necessary given my authority as HOA president. I see. Mr. Garrison, do you have anything else to add? Just that I have also filed a police report for theft, and this matter is being investigated by the Ashland Police Department, I said. Judge Moore raised her eyebrows. Is that so? Well then, I am ready to rule. She looked at her notes for a moment, then looked up at both of us. This is one of the more clear-cut cases I have seen in some time, she said. The defendant's argument that an HOA president has the authority to take private property without permission for community purposes is without legal merit. That is theft, plain and simple. The video evidence is unambiguous. The plaintiff's documentation is thorough and credible. I find in favor of the plaintiff in the full amount requested. She tapped her gavel. The Pine Ridge Homeowners Association is ordered to pay Mr. Paul Garrison the sum of $2,267, which includes the value of the stolen firewood, interest, and court costs. Payment is due within 30 days. Next case. Brenda looked like she had been slapped. Her face went from red to pale in about 2 seconds. Richard Maloney gathered his papers quickly, whispering something to her that I could not hear. I collected my materials and walked out of the courtroom. Tom Chen was waiting in the hallway. I had told him about the hearing, and he had come for moral support. How did it go? He asked. I won, full amount. Tom grinned and shook my hand. I knew you would. Congratulations, man. You did what a lot of us did not have the guts to do. We walked outside together into the bright June sunshine. I felt lighter than I had in months. It was not even really about the money, though getting paid back was nice. It was about standing up to someone who thought they were above the law and proving that they were not. But the story was not over yet. 2 weeks later, I received a check from the HOA for the full amount. I deposited it immediately. That same day, I got a call from Detective Kowalski. Mr. Garrison, I wanted to update you on the criminal case, he said. The district attorney has decided to file charges against Brenda Hutchins for second-degree theft and criminal trespass. We are also charging 2 other board members, Michael Stevens and Patricia Donnelly, as accomplices. There will be arraignments next month. That was fast, I said. The evidence you provided made it easy. Plus, once we started investigating, 3 other homeowners came forward with similar complaints. Turns out the HOA has been doing this for at least 5 years. We are estimating they stole over $10,000 worth of firewood and other property from residents during that time. $10,000. Jesus. Yeah, it is a bigger case than we initially thought. The DA is taking it seriously. There might also be federal charges if we can prove wire fraud or mail fraud related to how the HOA handled their finances. The state is sending auditors to look at their books. Wow, I just wanted my wood back. Detective Kowalski chuckled. Well, you opened up a can of worms. But it is a can of worms that needed to be opened. These people have been abusing their power for years. It is time someone held them accountable. The arraignment happened in July. I did not attend, but Tom Chen did and gave me a full report. Brenda, Michael, and Patricia all pleaded not guilty and were released on their own recognizance pending trial. Brenda was forced to step down as HOA president by the remaining board members, who were desperately trying to distance themselves from the scandal. The local newspaper picked up the story, and it became a bit of a sensation in Ashland. HOA president charged with stealing firewood was the headline. The story detailed the charges, the video evidence, and the civil judgment against the HOA. My name was mentioned, but I declined to be interviewed. The negative publicity was devastating for the HOA's reputation. Several homeowners filed a petition to dissolve the association entirely, arguing that it had become corrupt and was no longer serving its intended purpose. That effort ultimately failed, but it led to a complete turnover of the board. Every single member either resigned or was voted out in a special election. The new board was led by Tom Chen, who reluctantly agreed to serve as president. His first act was to issue a formal apology to me and the other victims of the firewood thefts. His second act was to repay every single person who had been stolen from, using HOA funds. His third act was to implement new oversight procedures and financial transparency requirements to prevent future abuse. The criminal trial took place in October. I was called to testify, which was an interesting experience. The prosecutor walked me through my evidence step by step. I explained the trail camera footage, the documentation, everything. Brenda's defense attorney tried to argue that I had entrapped the HOA by not securing my woodpile, but the judge shut that down pretty quickly. You cannot entrap someone into committing a crime by simply leaving your property unsecured. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Brenda Hutchins guilty of second-degree theft and criminal trespass. Michael Stevens and Patricia Donnelly were found guilty of being accomplices. Sentencing was scheduled for November. At the sentencing hearing, the judge came down hard. Brenda was sentenced to 60 days in jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution to all the victims. Michael and Patricia got shorter sentences, but also had to pay restitution and were placed on probation. The judge's comments during sentencing were scathing. She talked about how HOA board members are entrusted with authority to serve their communities, not to enrich themselves or abuse their power. She said that Brenda's actions represented a betrayal of that trust, and that the systematic nature of the thefts showed a level of arrogance and entitlement that warranted significant punishment. Brenda cried during the sentencing. I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for her, but only a tiny bit. She had spent years bullying people and taking what was not hers. She had threatened me with fines and sanctions when I stood up to her. She had tried to use the legal system to intimidate me into backing down. She had earned what she got. The state auditors finished their review of the HOA's finances in December. Their report was damning. They found evidence of misappropriation of funds, improper expenditures, and inadequate financial controls. The HOA was placed under state oversight and required to implement a series of reforms. The auditors also referred several matters to federal authorities for possible prosecution. In January of 2026, exactly 1 year after I first discovered the theft, I received a final check from the State Restitution Fund. It covered the full amount I had been owed plus additional compensation for my time and expenses. I also received checks covering the restitution payments from Brenda, Michael, and Patricia as ordered by the court. All told, I recovered every penny I was owed and then some. But more importantly, the Pine Ridge HOA was completely transformed. Under Tom's leadership, it became a functional, transparent organization that actually served the community instead of terrorizing it. Meetings were open and recorded. Finances were published monthly. Decisions were made by vote, not by decree. I stayed in my cabin in Ashland, continuing to enjoy the peace and quiet of mountain life. I rebuilt my woodpile in the fall of 2025, and this time nobody touched it. I kept the trail cameras running anyway, just in case, but they only captured footage of deer and the occasional black bear passing through my property. Tom and I became good friends. We would get together once a month to share a bottle of whiskey and talk about life. He thanked me repeatedly for having the courage to stand up to Brenda when nobody else would. You know what the funny thing is? Tom said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. If Brenda had just asked, most people probably would have given her some firewood. People are generally pretty generous when you treat them with respect. That is the thing about bullies, I said. They do not understand respect. They only understand power and intimidation, and when someone finally stands up to them, they crumble. Tom raised his glass. Here is to standing up to bullies. I will drink to that, I said, and we clinked glasses. Looking back on the whole experience, I do not regret a single moment of it. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, it took time and effort and money. Yes, there were moments when I wondered if it was worth it. But in the end, justice was served. A corrupt HOA president went to jail. Money was returned to the people it was stolen from. And an entire community learned that no one is above the law, no matter what position of authority they hold. The trail camera is still mounted on a tree near my woodpile. Sometimes when I am out splitting wood, I glance at it and smile. It is a reminder that sometimes the best defense against injustice is simply to document everything and stand your ground. Bullies rely on people being too tired, too scared, or too apathetic to fight back. But when someone finally does fight back with evidence and determination, the bullies lose every single time. My woodpile is fully stocked now, neatly stacked and ready for the winter. I split every log myself, just like I did before, and every single piece of that wood belongs to me. Nobody is going to take it without asking. Not anymore. The Pine Ridge community is a better place now. People feel safe in their own homes. They do not have to worry about arbitrary fines or vindictive board members. The HOA actually works for the community instead of against it. And it all started because I refused to let someone steal my firewood without consequences. Sometimes I drive past the community center and see smoke coming from the chimney. But now, I know that the wood burning in that fireplace was purchased legally and belongs to the HOA. Tom made sure of that. He implemented a policy that all firewood used for community purposes must be purchased from legitimate suppliers with receipts maintained for audit purposes. No more stealing from residents. No more cutting corners. Everything above board. Brenda Hutchins served her 60 days in the Jackson County Jail. When she got out, she moved away from Ashland entirely. I heard through the grapevine that she relocated somewhere in California. I hope she learned her lesson, but honestly, I do not spend much time thinking about her anymore. She is someone else's problem now. Michael Stevens and Patricia Donnelly stayed in the area but kept very low profiles. They paid their restitution, completed their probation, and stayed far away from any HOA business. I saw Michael once at the grocery store in town. He saw me too and quickly turned and went down a different aisle. I did not pursue him. As far as I was concerned, the matter was closed. The legal bills for the whole ordeal came to about $1,500, which I considered money well spent. My attorney said I could have probably gotten more in damages if I had filed a civil suit beyond the small claims action, but I did not see the point. I got what I was owed. The criminals went to jail. The HOA was reformed. That was enough. I did give one interview to the local newspaper after everything was resolved. The reporter wanted to know what advice I would give to other people facing similar situations with their HOAs. My answer was simple. Document everything, know your rights, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself. Most bullies back down when confronted with evidence and determination. And if they do not back down, the legal system is there to protect you. The article ran with the headline, "Local Man Takes on HOA and Wins." It was picked up by a few regional papers and even got shared on social media. I got emails from people all over the country who had their own HOA horror stories. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to share their experiences. A few thanked me for fighting back and inspiring them to stand up for themselves. One email in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman in Florida who had been battling her HOA for years over various petty issues. She said reading about my case gave her the courage to document everything and file a lawsuit. She wrote to tell me that she had won her case and that the HOA president had been removed. She credited my story with giving her the roadmap to victory. That email made everything worthwhile. The stress, the time, the money, all of it. Because it was not just about my firewood. It was about showing people that they do not have to accept abuse from petty tyrants in positions of minor authority. They do not have to roll over and take it. They can fight back, and they can win. My life returned to normal after the dust settled. I went back to my software engineering work, which I do remotely from my cabin. I continued to enjoy the beauty of the Oregon mountains. I split firewood, maintained my property, and lived the quiet life I had moved to Ashland to find in the first place. But there was one lasting change. People in the neighborhood started treating me differently. With respect, maybe even a little bit of awe. I became known as the guy who took down Brenda Hutchins. When I walked my property or went to the mailbox, neighbors would wave and sometimes stop to chat. People who had never talked to me before suddenly wanted to be friendly. Tom joked that I had become a local legend. I told him that was ridiculous, but he insisted it was true. At the annual community barbecue in the summer of 2026, multiple people came up to me to shake my hand and thank me for what I had done. One older man, who I had never met before, pulled me aside and told me that Brenda had been threatening to fine him over his vegetable garden for 2 years. After my case, she backed off completely, and he was finally able to enjoy his garden in peace. "You did that," he said, gripping my hand tightly. "You made it so the rest of us could live without fear. Thank you." I did not know what to say to that, so I just nodded and told him he was welcome. The new HOA board under Tom's leadership proved to be competent and fair. They focused on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. They repaved roads that needed it. They maintained common areas. They organized community events that brought people together. It was what an HOA should be all along. In the fall of 2026, I was approached by Tom with an unexpected request. The board wanted to know if I would be willing to serve as the HOA's treasurer. They wanted someone with attention to detail who could not be bullied or corrupted. Someone who would stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. I thought about it for a few days. Part of me wanted to say no. I had never wanted to be involved in HOA politics. That was the whole reason I had bought a cabin in the mountains, to get away from that kind of nonsense. But another part of me recognized that this was an opportunity to make sure what happened with Brenda never happened again. To be part of the solution rather than just someone who had fought against the problem. I accepted the position. I have been serving as treasurer for 4 months now as I write this. It is not glamorous work, but it is important. I review every expense. I maintain transparent financial records. I make sure every penny of HOA funds is spent appropriately and legally. And I make absolutely certain that nobody takes anything from anyone's private property without explicit written permission. The woodpile that started this whole saga is still there, stacked neatly behind my cabin. It is a monument to the principle that your property is your property, and nobody has the right to take it without permission. I look at it sometimes and remember those cold January mornings when I first discovered the theft. I remember the anger I felt, but also the determination. I remember deciding that I was not going to let it slide, that I was going to fight back no matter how hard it was. That decision changed everything. Not just for me, but for an entire community. It got rid of a corrupt HOA president. It reformed a broken system. It inspired other people to stand up for themselves. And it taught me something important about justice. It is not something that just happens. You have to fight for it. You have to document it. You have to be willing to see it through even when it is difficult and inconvenient. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. Without hesitation. Because some things are worth fighting for, even if it is just a pile of firewood in the mountains of Oregon. The sun is setting over the Cascade Range as I finish writing this. My wood stove is burning warm, keeping my cabin cozy against the evening chill. The wood came from my own property, cut and split by my own hands. Every log burns with the satisfaction of knowing that it is mine, purchased with my labor, and nobody took it without my permission. That is worth more than $2,000. That is worth all the stress and time and effort it took to fight back. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about firewood. It is about dignity. It is about standing up for yourself when someone tries to take advantage of you. It is about proving that bullies do not always win. Sometimes, if you are willing to fight hard enough and smart enough, the good guys win. And that makes all the difference.